FLM, wide open thinking, world-class work, and far-reaching results. Now with locations in Minneapolis, Columbus, Indianapolis, and Washington, D.C. A strategic marketing and communications company dedicated to serving clients who specialize in the business of agriculture and the life of rural communities.
Thank you for joining us for our Agri-Pulse Washington Week in Review. I'm Spencer Chase, joined as always by Agri-Pulse Senior Editor Phil Brasher, discussing the week that was, agriculturally speaking, in Washington, D.C. And it's been a while. Took the month of October off there. Took a little bit of time off for the elections as well, because there wasn't a whole lot going on here on Capitol Hill. But lawmakers returned to town the week after the election with a lot better idea of the roadmap that they have going forward, who the administration is, what the next Congress is going to look like. So now they're willing to work on some things in the lame duck session. And there's been a lot of things that have been thrown around that might happen in the lame duck. One thing we knew for sure, regardless of the political outlook, was that they were going to have to pass some kind of funding mechanism to avoid a government shutdown in December. And Phil, we heard this week some comments from House Speaker Paul Ryan about the timeline that they're thinking for the length of that funding mechanism.
Right. It looks like they're going to do a continuing resolution that's sort of a stopgap spending bill to make sure the government has the money to keep operating. Carrying it over to March. Donald Trump, of course, will be president then. Trump wanted, talking to the Hill, they wanted to put off these decisions on spending until March. Otherwise, the Congress will be negotiating with the White House, and Republicans are going to get something much more to their liking, obviously, in March than they would in December.
Mm-hmm. And so with this continuing resolution, obviously the Trump administration going to have their say in the next one. But in this one right here, what should agriculture be watching out for in terms of spending levels, policy riders, things like that? Kind of what's the state of play on that, on things like that in the current CR?
Well, in terms of policy riders, in terms of the policy issues like the Waters of the U.S. rule and some of these other things that they might have tried to get into a big spending bill in December. That's all being pushed off now. The urgency is gone somewhat because with the incoming Trump administration, they will be working with Congress to deal with those issues. The WOTUS rule is going to be history at some point. The question is whether Congress does it, whether the administration does it, or whether the Justice Department does it by simply not fighting the court case that WOTUS is now tied up into. But so the urgency has gone out of those issues, and so that will be dealt with next year, as well as the spending levels for the rest of fiscal 2017, which goes through next September. What does that leave? One of the things we could see is the Water Resources Development Bill. That's one of the most likely pieces of legislation that we'll see. Pat Roberts, who's chairman of the Senate Agriculture Committee, says he'd still like to pass a child nutrition reauthorization bill, just so he can get that off his plate for next year when they start working on the Farm Bill. Another distant possibility is an energy bill. I think right now the water resources bill is probably the most likely of those issues.
And Phil, you mentioned the Farm Bill. Obviously, we didn't see any legislation get produced this week, but we did hear some commentary from the chairman of the two respective House and Senate committees that are going to be developing that bill. Chairman Conaway said after a hearing on the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, the last of their long-running hearing series, said that he didn't completely shut the door on splitting the Farm Bill. He said he's open to whatever process it's going to take to move a bill across the House floor, and that's something we've seen before. The House did split the Farm Bill in their last attempt, so it wouldn't be something new for the House to try and do this.
They did it, and it was promptly put back together when the bill got over to the Senate because the Senate Democrats would not go along with passing nutrition separately and cutting it. That breaks up this coalition between farm groups, conservationists, and the nutrition community that has long been seen as critical to passing farm bills. Obviously, if you want to cut either farm programs or nutrition spending, politically, the easiest way to do that is to somehow split up that coalition and take those bills apart. So we'll see. He did not commit to keeping the bill together, though, as you say.
And also asked Chairman Conaway some things that have been going on in the ag community of potentially trying to move up to make it a 2017 farm bill instead of a 2018 farm bill. He didn't really bite on that question. He simply said he's committed to getting the legislation extended on time, which would be in 2018. Which does leave the door open for getting it done before then. But you were able to talk to Senate Ag Committee Chair Pat Roberts of Kansas, and he gave you kind of a little bit of insight on the timeline that he's thinking, at least.
Well, he believes that they really need to get, at least over in the Senate, they need to get a bill moving by the end of next year, by the end of 2017, just as a practical matter, because 2018 is an election year. What if a third of the Senate is up for election, all of the House, and so they, just as a practical matter, he's saying we need to get this. We need to get a bill moving by the end of next year so that we can get it done in 2018. And getting it done in 2017 would be a very, very heavy lift. And even getting it in 2018, as we've seen with these more recent farm bills, is a challenge in and of itself.
So the first of many farm bill conversations we'll likely have here on this program as the years unfold. And Phil, want to wrap up quickly with just some brief talk on kind of the talk of the town in Washington right now, the transition over to a Trump administration, the powers that be picking the players that be in that role right now. Not hearing a ton as it relates to agriculture.
No, and there's I think there's been a lot of discussion in the media about how it's taking a lot of time and there's delays. One thing we should point out is that when President Obama, after he was elected in 2008, they didn't actually get around to announcing Tom Vilsack as the Agriculture Secretary until December the 17th.
Right.
That was 6 weeks after the election. So we have some time here. It's just been over a week as we talk. What we do know is that next week, right before Thanksgiving, they're expected to, the Trump transition team says that they will announce the group that will go to USDA and EPA from the transition team to work with the officials that are there at USDA and EPA and the other domestic policy agencies. So they will be in place next week at some point. In terms of an agriculture secretary, an EPA administrator, we may be waiting for a while yet.
So I know, at least personally, the question of who's your pick for the next ag secretary has been a pretty fun question to ask in the last 6 or 8 months. But all of a sudden, it's a lot more loaded question now that we're a little bit closer. We know who the administration is, and we know kind of the goals of the administration and policy as they relates to agriculture. So be a fun couple of weeks here trying to figure out how those chess pieces all line up.
Right. Stay tuned. We'll be on top of it.
But I think that's going to do it for this week. We're going to be off next week, as will Congress, as they head home for Thanksgiving. But tune back in early December as we try and figure out what the funding mechanism is going to look like, and as we get more details on a Trump Agriculture Secretary, EPA Administrator, and really Trump administration as a whole. But for Phil Brasher, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one.